Well, addressing that old cliche, no money, no honey, our couples are asked if they would endure if there wasn't any money.
I don't think so. I think if you're willing to work together and be honest with that situation, I think you could really grow to have fun and enjoy making a plan, coming up with a strategy of how we can do this together.
And I piggyback on that. I believe if you keep the honey, the two of you can get the money.
I think that when money gets tight, that's when true love shows itself. When you've got to struggle, when you've got to balance things, when you've got to, what should I say, starve yourself, deprive yourself of things, then you really find out, to me, that's when love, I think, truly shows itself.
I don't think for us it would, because we both started out with no money and we're still together.
Well, that certainly is an interesting perspective, no money, no honey. It is good to know that the couples that we had here feel that they would survive with no money. But I think there is a certain way that we all grow up, especially girls, that we're princesses and we want to have a big wedding. I mean, I don't, for example, I don't have an engagement ring. And when I tell women that I told my husband that I didn't want one, they're outraged. What? What do you mean? I would never marry somebody who didn't buy me a huge ring. So, I mean, I think we start right at the very beginning of putting these expectations on our future spouses about how much they should earn. And Lon, let's start with you, because I imagine couples do come to you so they can build that nest egg. But do you think that couples are having a realistic expectation of what they each bring?
Well, that's the really tough from the standpoint right now. Expectations are, with these difficult times, are having to be brought down to where some couples may, from a financial standpoint, have different goals 5 years ago than they were today, and they have to adjust those expectations. And what the couples alluded to earlier was perfect from a standpoint of, and you also said it too, Kathy, is that now is the opportunity for them to strengthen their marriage. Don't look upon this as a negative from a financial standpoint, but actually an opportunity to strengthen their marriage, to determine what really is important. And going through those, lowering those expectations is a perfect challenge for them to be able to grab their marriage by the reins and make it much stronger than what it had been when the times were good.
And Kathy, when Lon had mentioned earlier about how things will bubble to the surface, like you may not even be fighting about money, but you're really mad about money, but other things are coming out. Is that sort of a make or break thing? Does that show you that, well, maybe our relationship isn't as strong as I thought it was, or is it just that you haven't really dealt with the issue?
I think a lot of it is that a lot of times couples have not dealt with the issue. And this is an opportunity to do it. If they haven't done their homework before now, this is really a good time to face it. And it may simply start with taking a month and looking at what you're bringing in and what you're spending, and dividing those expenses into what needs and wants, and really think about, do I really have to have this latte every morning, or do I have to go out to lunch? Can I bring my lunch to work? And I think as couples start taking little steps, they're going to start to feel more empowered and more in control of the situation and less a victim of what's going on right now.
And Peggy, when couples are in this situation where the money is not there, any other suggestions that we have not touched on how they can really get down to address it? Because sometimes when you want to talk about money and you have the best of intentions of coming up with a good plan, you know, people have all this baggage from their past and the way they were raised, and have a hard time really expressing that openly.
Well, you pointed out two things. One of them is that blueprint that's in your head when you're dating and before you get married, what that blueprint is from your families. You know, you didn't want an engagement ring, from whatever that blueprint was in your head. So everybody comes into the relationship with a blueprint of how they were raised. Some families were raised as savers, some were spenders, some just didn't talk about it. If you can understand that blueprint that each of you come from, and again, back to what Lon's talking about, expectations, and talk about where your expectations are. Sometimes couples are surprised that they actually are on the same page. They're going about it in different directions because of that blueprint in their head. But when they actually start to talk about it and literally sit down and talk about long-term goals, short-term goals, and immediate goals, they end up kind of finding out we are on the same page. We just looked at it differently because of that blueprint.
When we've talked about expectations, is it should you expect that your spouse is going to feel the same way about money or think that you should invest here and not spend there? I mean, is that realistic that you're going to have the same
absolutely
perspective?
not. And one of my favorite sayings is expectations are resentments waiting to happen. If you have these expectations of your spouse based on your blueprint, there's right there, it's going to cause failure and disappointment because, again, it goes back to that blueprint. So the expectation is, first of all, understanding what each other's expectation is. And the only way to do that, I mean, we can't emphasize enough, is talk, talk, talk. Whether it's taking a walk, whether it's going on a date, do those kind of things that get you in that atmosphere that makes you want to talk. I mean, I love the couple who said, without my honey, there would be no money, you know, because it does take two to work at it. And sometimes when people are experiencing financial issues, they have the tendency not to talk about it, as if they'll just go away. And that's the worst thing they can do.
One suggestion would be to ask your spouse, how do you feel about this? Or what do you think about this? Ask open-ended questions and listen actively, let that person talk and suspend judgment and just listen, and then you provide your input. And I think that's, you know, that could be the start of a changed attitude towards money.
Now, Lon, I wanted to ask too, because you deal directly with people and their money. I think a lot of people could really use help on getting their finances together, having a financial plan, but maybe they don't have a lot of money, and so they feel like, well, people who handle portfolios and stuff will only do it for people who have a lot of money, and we don't, and so they struggle through on their own. But are there resources where people can, you know, really get that expert opinion that they might need to sort of get them on the right path?
Absolutely. There are credit counseling services available to consumers, and really at this point in time, which we all, I think, are alluding to it, is that right now couples are struggling to find that common bond among themselves when it comes to money. I don't think there's any right or wrong answer here. I think that couples will find that they want to come they have some of the same goals, but they may not get there necessarily the same, and or one spouse may feel like they're not being heard when they find out that they're basically wanting the same things, but for whatever reason, they're not communicating to where one spouse can express their concerns, express their fears, and have the exact same goals as the other spouse. And that's where that line of communication is so important right now. And talking with some of these other consumer credit counseling services and things like that, you know, talk to your local bank. You know, a lot of people don't use that resource. Those are all resources that are available to them to express how they're feeling and get to the point to where they can start to organize their finances and get a plan together.
Well, our next couple's question, how do you ensure that financial stress doesn't bankrupt your marriage?
Communication. I mean, just don't be afraid don't keep secrets from each other. Don't be afraid to talk about it. Talk about your fears, about your hopes.
I think it's also important not to build too many obligations. If you build up too many financial obligations, you create that unnecessary money pressure.
I don't know if you can ensure anything that you don't have absolute control over it, but the Bible says to be a good steward over what God has given you. So if you're a good steward, I think you'll work through it.
Just knowledge that money is just a part of it, a part of this relationship. You know, it's not everything, and
It's not what makes the actual marriage work.
remember why you first got involved and why you were first attracted to each other. And generally, it's not about the money. I would like to hope it wasn't for us, so we'd like to go back and always recapture that feeling.